Hello and welcome everybody. Today is April 3rd and we are going to do a live demonstration of offline environment for license compliance with Pip. And Mo, please take it away.
Hi, my name is Mo. I'm a software engineer on the compliance analysis team, and let's get started. So first step is set up and prove air gap. So before I jump into the host, I'm just going to give you a quick overview, just a refresher for everyone. In this particular scenario, we've got 3 hosts, one being the self-managed GitLab instance, which has got this name. We've got a Python package registry. So this isn't a full mirror of a PyPy, but it's a partial mirror. So if I just quickly jump over to that, you can see we've got a subset. It's about a dozen or so packages hosted on this PyPy instance hosted within our offline network. And the third host is the Bastion. So this isn't as important for us, but just it's important to know that this is the instance that we used for sideloading the Docker images that are hosted on GitLab.com into the self-managed instance. So it's more of like a proxy to get these images to the right location. So those are the 3 hosts we're going to work with today. And the next thing I just want to quickly show you is the firewall rules. All this information you can find right on the Google Compute instance dashboard. I just sort of screen cap the important pieces. So these are the inbound rules for the GitLab test instance. We can see that we've disabled all by default, and then we've allowed access to SSH, RDP, and HTTPS, as well as ping. So these are the inbound firewall rules. And then the outbound is, this is a new rule that we've added, which is to allow outbound to anything within the local private network. So this will be everything in the 10.star.star.star.ip range. And then after that, everything else is blocked. So these are going to be all outbound calls to the public internet. So this is the firewall setup. So now what I'll just quickly do is jump into a terminal just to prove that we are in a somewhat like offline environment. So this is the actual test instance that I described above. I'm just going to open up 2 panels. So on the right-hand side is my host machine from where I'm sitting at home. And on the left-hand side is that test instance. I'm just going to do a quick curl from my home machine to gitlab.com. And we should be able to see what the output would look like in a scenario where we're actually able to make outbound requests. So in this particular case, you can see that it was able to resolve the IP address for gitlab.com. We sent an HTTP GET request to the actual IP address that we resolved. In this case, it's telling us to redirect to HTTPS because we want to do things over the TLS layer. All right, and I'm going to run the same thing, this time on the self-managed instance. And we'll just go HTTP again, gitlab.com. And you can see that we were able to resolve the IP address, but then we're not actually able to make the outbound request to gitlab.com. So to do like a comprehensive proof, I think we'd have to sort of brute force all IP ranges in the IPv4 range and ports. But for the most part, this is like a very high level proof that we've disabled outbound access from the test instance. Just jump back to the scorecard, make sure I'm not missing anything. So that's set up and prove air gap.
So which means we need to stop and grade it. I put in a note that this is the first time, except I can't spell, that we introduced a Python mirror. So I think we'll have to have Kevin weigh in on that one, just if he thinks that was clear enough or whatever.
Just to clarify, so for the last demo, we use GitLab's own Maven repository functionality to do that? Yeah.
And then this one's slightly different. So that's the only thing I think we should point out that he should pay special attention to.
Yep. So as far as proving that we are in an offline environment, do we feel that that was successfully executed?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's do, should we do 5 or should we do 4 just because of the...
Let's do 4s until we get Kevin to just review the video.
Okay.
And Tanya, I see you nodding your head, but verbal representation is always preferred.
Yep, agreed. 4 until we get Kevin to review.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mo.
All right, so step 2 is the show setup and config, follow user documentation in order to download resources, follow user documentation in order to set up and configure license scanning to run for default pipelines. So I don't think you're going to get a good score on this one because we don't really have any documentation for this directly. So the one thing that we've added support for is the pip index URL. Now, this documentation is currently on the dependency scanning page. We haven't been able to get this documentation also added to the license compliance page. So that is something that I think we still need to finish. So if we look at the license compliance page, the available variables hasn't been updated yet. So pip index URL is the variable that we're taking advantage of. We're mirroring the same variable that's being used in dependency scanning to keep a consistent, just keep consistency between the two, but I don't have any documentation to walk through. So what I'll do is I'll just show you the test project. So this demo is broken up into 2 sections. So for Python, there's pip and pipenv. I'm going to go through the pip example first as the package manager for this first example. So I've broken this down into 2 merge requests. In the first merge request, this is an example pip project. So in this example, oh, I should just backtrack 1 sec. I didn't show you the configuration. So this is the default configuration that we're using for all of our license scanning here. So by default, you include this template, and by including this template, it adds the license scanning job. The one change that we've added on top of the default template is we're just specifying the location where you pull this image from. The default location says to go reach out to gitlab.com to download this image. And we don't want the self-managed instance to go out to the internet because it doesn't have access to the internet. So we're just telling it to pull it from a local Docker registry that's hosted on the self-managed instance. And that was part of the prep work that was already done that we've seen examples of. So this is the default configuration.
And that's the GitLab Docker repo right there. Like
Yes,
the internal. Okay.
Precisely. We don't have a different DNS entry for it, which is why it's hooked directly into 4567. We could add some rules to like the Nginx configuration to do some sort of reverse proxy, but for the purpose of this demo, I think that's just overkill. So we're piggybacking, again, container registry repo that is hosted on this GitLab self-managed instance. And so the prep work was mirroring the gitlab.com version of that image into the self-managed environment. All right, so that's the default setup. Now let's jump into the pip project example. So in this pip project, we've added a single requirements.txt file, and this is how you describe your dependencies in typical pip projects. And we've added one dependency, the pip dep tree. So we're gonna try to source this dependency from the pip index URL that we're specifying as a variable in the configuration. So this is the key variable that specifies like where to go pull these packages so that we can analyze the metadata to figure out what the software licenses are. Now, the one workaround that we have here that ideally would like to get rid of is we've added a custom configuration file to just add this host as a trusted host. Without this, at the moment, the package pull will fail because we haven't provided an interface for specifying a root certificate to trust. So as soon as it connects to the HTTPS endpoint, it'll receive the X509 certificate and say, this is self-signed. It's not signed by anyone that I trust. I'm sorry, I can't trust this. So this is something eventually we'll get rid of, but for now, because we haven't solved the TLS issues, this is an intermediate step. So you could picture this being as deleted when we have a solution for that. Otherwise, this is the interface for specifying your custom repo.
And our users did confirm that for testing this out, they were fine with bypass.
They were fine with bypass? You mean as this?
Yeah. For MVC, they're fine with
okay.
us saying it's okay to ignore a certificate being untrusted for MVC, just so everybody on the call is aware that we did discuss that with them.
Fantastic, that's great news. All right, so this is the setup. And what I'm gonna do is I've already run a pipeline, so I'm gonna go ahead and just show you the results of that pipeline, and then I'll go ahead and add a new dependency to this requirements.txt, and I'll push that up and we'll see the changes in the pipeline after that. So let's just review the latest pipeline. So we can ignore this top one. This was me, I made a mistake in the configuration, syntax error in YAML. This happened an hour ago, so the most recent pipeline is actually from 16 minutes ago. So let's just take a quick peek at that pipeline. And we can see the license scanning job was successful. I can get down to the gory details so we can see the job output to see where it sources its data from. But the most interesting part, I think, will be that we were able to source the pip dep tree dependency as well as identify its license based on the metadata that we sourced from downloading it.
Did you not add the test air gap job to the pipelines?
I did not add the test air gap job because I did the proof at the beginning, but I can add that now if you'd like.
You don't need to add it now, but for next time when we're gonna do a combined, just because this way it kind of proves that ongoing it's calling out. So
Okay.
I'll just put a note for next time on that.
I'm happy to add that now. It's not a big deal. We can just say air gap proof. I don't know what the base image. Actually, you know what? Let's do this next time because I don't know what images are actually available to me on that host. Sorry, Nicole. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a new dependency. Let's just take a quick peek back at what dependencies are available to me. So if I look at the Python or the PyPy index, you can see that these are the available packages that are available to me. So if I choose a package that's not on this list, it should actually fail because it then wasn't able to determine that. So let's just make up a package. I'll submit that and let's watch it fail. So I'm going to make this up. We're going to call this, what's not on there? Mocha's not on there. So let's add Mocha. And let's add this back to the requirements.txt. Add unknown package. Oops, that's my GPG sign-in key. Git push origin, and we're going to push this back up and trigger a pipeline. Now, going back to the merge request output, let's take a peek at the Pip project. We should have triggered a new pipeline now from that commit. There's a couple of things that I'd like to improve on, but I'm just going to call them out right now. I don't think they're blockers, but the scan is a little bit slow. So one of the steps at the beginning of the scan is it attempts to determine the tool chain associated with the project. So for example, if it's a Ruby project that's dependent on a specific version of Ruby, let's say an older version, 2.4, etc., the image will then attempt to install the tool chain associated with that project. And so you'll see at the very beginning of this run here, this is where it's actually trying to reach out and say, what are the latest versions of those tools that are available? And this is something that we don't need in an air gap environment, I'm assuming, unless customers want to control like where they can pull those tools from and install them from. So this is something I'd like to improve on. You'll just see this as like a slow run. So at this point, it's trying to make those outbound calls and it's going to fail, and then the analysis will begin. And while that's running, I'm just going to ask if there's any questions or if I'm providing enough information.
So right now your setup config file is using the local setup, like the local only. Yeah, because step 2 is that you set up using the YAML everything. So I think we might be in a state where we can assess step 2, which is just that you have finished setting up license scanner to be able to run in the air gap. And right now, because you're using the local Docker image for the analyzer, I think, because that's the current one on your main branch, right?
Correct. So in the main branch, we are sourcing the license scanning image from the self-managed Docker container registry. And then we're also specifying where to download the Python packages from, which is within the local intranet for that.
So I think we can score step 2 because step 3 is the pipeline itself, and then step 4 is the results of the pipeline. So
I'll pause here.
I'm gonna say this one is a low score just because we don't have the user documentation, which is kind of the most important part. So I'm not sure how everybody else feels, but I'm thinking like 2, maybe 3, until we've actually got user docs that a user could view.
I think that's fair.
I think that's more than fair.
Okay. So yeah, that score. Obviously, we are planning to do the docs, but they don't exist yet. So.
Yes, I was focused on making it work.
That's fine.
Are we ready for step 3?
I think so.
I think
And
I
that
sort
should
of already
be-
jumped.
You sort of started that one.
Yep.
So once you can show that the pipeline's actually running and show the job log, I think then we'll mostly be done step 3 if it passes. It's still thinking.
It's still thinking.
You can do it, little job. And if you actually wanted to talk a little bit about, you were saying that some of the length in this is that it's looking to update its tool chain.
Yep.
So if the customer is running their own local registries, could that be something that we could let them point at other resources, or not really?
At this point, it's difficult. So it's
Mhm.
sourcing. It's using a tool called. We're using a tool called ASDF for determining how to install the tools, where to install those tools from, and then downloading it from the default locations. Okay, so I got the error that I was expecting. Let's just take a quick peek. So I added a package called Mocha. And it says could not find a version that satisfies Mocha because it doesn't exist on our internal registry. And so we did the best that we could. Because we weren't able to pull it from the registry that was provided, which, where's that URL, which is here, we continued to scan as much as we could. Now, the gory details are here is because I increased the verbosity of the log level, but you can see we were still able to complete the scan. It's not a complete scan because we couldn't source these packages. So this is where I'm not sure if this should be a failure for the job, if we need to surface that, because it is an incomplete scan in the sense that we were able to scan as much as we could, but this project has a package that isn't actually available from the index that was provided to us. So if I go back to—
So right now, if you look at connected environments, I believe that we don't fail. We pass with the note that we were unable to gather additional data points. And due to the fact that licenses tend to be a policy item, not a secure or a compliance and policy item, not a security item, we have defaulted to not alarming the user per se. And so that is consistent with our connected and offline environments both. We could always improve our documentation to be clear about that to customers, but I don't think we want to change that to alarm them if something can't be located.
Okay, so this is consistent. So you can see we identified 0 licenses because we weren't able to complete the package installation step because the package installer said, I can't finish this because I couldn't find one of the packages, and therefore it was a failure. But it surfaces as a check mark, which is compliant with our current way of doing things. Okay, so now let's go get something happier. Let's go actually install a package that is available in our registry. So I'm going to pick on Botto3 specifically because it's got a few other dependencies. So we'll be able to see that we detected the licenses for that package as well as its dependencies. So let's go update this. We're going to go add Botto3. Apologize for the speed. So add Botto3 package. Just need to add that to my agent. And let's kick off another run. Now, just to respect your time, this is going to take a little while for that pipeline to kick off. So I'd like to come back to that pipeline and maybe just take a quick peek at pip env while that's running. Does that work for everyone? All right. So let's look at our pip env project. Just want to make sure the pipeline did trigger and that it will be running while we're talking about pip env, and it is running. Perfect. Okay, so let's take a look at this other merge request. So in this merge request, I'm submitting a pip env style project. So pip env projects rely on 2 types of files: the pip file, where you describe your dependencies, and then the pip file.lock, which converts your description of those dependencies to locked versions of those dependencies so that everyone on the project can pull the same version of those packages. So in this particular example, we're still piggybacking on the Docker image that is hosted on the self-managed instance container registry. So that hasn't changed. We're also adding pip index URL. So this is a location where we're going to source the actual packages defined in the pip file.lock. In the pip file itself, it's important to describe the source as well. Like the default source is pypy.org. So, as a sort of project owner, it's important to include the right sources in there. Otherwise, this is where issues could arise. And the one last thing to note is that I'm also disabling the Verify Ssl step. And this is to circle back on the issue that when we get the X509 cert for this particular DNS entry, it's going to be signed by itself. And so we don't have that certificate in our trusted root store at this point. So this is just, again, that workaround, but I think we said this is okay for MVC. And then we generate the lock file. So if we look at a recent scan of this and the job output, we can see that we were able to identify the pip dep tree dependency, as well as that it's associated with a MIT software license. If we jump into the job output, we'll see the gory details of where it's actually pulling it from. So it's just specifying the mirror as the internal registry, and everything else is happening within the context of the network. This particular case, you can see it's, oh, I'm not ready to show you that. So this is a little bit of magic I'm hoping to show at the end, but for now, we can see that it is pulling from the intended sources and it is identifying software license. So let's go ahead and add a new dependency. And go ahead, ask.
So, well, it's less of a question, more. So that one was the pip. So we just showed that a pipeline can successfully run for pip, which was step 3, but we need to wait for the pip env pipeline to finish running to show that it's working for the lock files as well.
Yes. So these are two different sort of package managers.
They're the two package managers we support for today in production.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I don't know if it helps to level set, like pip is the default package manager for the Python ecosystem. Pip env seems to be like the direction that the Python community is moving towards. There is the pip file standard, or the RFC for it is intended to be moved back into pip, but right now the reference implementation is being done in pip env. So we will start to see, I think, I don't know what the timeline will be, that these pip files will actually be merged back into pip, and then this will be sort of the same thing. The difference between pip env and pip is that pip env is the mixture of pip plus virtual env, which creates like a virtual environment. And you're too much info, Mo. Okay, so let's go back to, so here, what I've done is I'm adding a new dependency to this pip file project. So I had this as a stash, so you didn't have to see this live. I just popped the stash, and I'm adding a bot03 dependency. So we already know that bot03 is available on our internal Python registry. And then from that, I had to update the lock file, which pulls down the actual signatures for this packages to make sure that nobody's tampering with them and that they match. So I'll commit this and we'll trigger another pipeline. Add bot03 package. And I'm sorry for the context switching. This pipeline is going to take a little bit of time. So I'm going to circle back to the pip pipeline, unless there's any questions. No, okay, perfect. So let's just double check that this pipeline is fired and running. And so we can see the pip file pipeline is going. Okay, so let's go back and check on the previous pip pipeline. So we're looking at the pip project again, and just as a refresher, what we did last time was we added a new dependency, bot03, and bot03 has other dependencies, and those dependencies are all available from the internal Python registry. So let's look at the pipeline. Oh, well, it passed, and it's saying it's passed, and we've discovered a few more licenses. So in this particular case, the previous pipeline, we saw that we only had one package, and that was the pip dep tree. This time we've got a few more licenses detected. We've still got pip dep tree in there, but now we've also got bot03 and its dependencies and its dependencies of its dependencies. So all these packages were sourced from the internal Python package mirror, and we'll just double check the job output to make sure that we're not calling out to anywhere else. So we were able to, okay, so our pip install went to that registry, installed, detected the new licenses from local metadata, and Ta-da! Trying to think, what am I missing here? I think that's, okay, so for the most part, just a full circle back, we had a requirements.txt file. We added one dependency. We were able to download that dependency from the internal mirror. We were able to detect the software licenses from the local metadata of that mirror. There's still some room for improvement because we haven't addressed things like this. So these are like things I think in the backlog for being able to parse the actual expressions better, so we can split them and treat them as individual licenses that they are.
But that's consistent with online and offline right now.
Yes, that is the current behavior everywhere. And now let's go back to pip file and let's see if pip file completed. Oops. Still running. Really sorry about the speed. I really do want to make this faster. Questions, concerns?
That's all right. So I'm just wondering, do we need to wait for pipenv to finish before we can grade step 3 then?
I think if it's successfully running, we can probably grade step 3. And then when it finishes, we can show the results of it and do step 4. So looking back, we were supposed to make the code changes. So we saw all the code changes, have it be an MR and have it run. And we saw the jobs running. I don't have any concerns about step 3. Anyone else have any?
Yeah, anything else we should point out, or any, yeah, I guess any other concerns around step 3?
Just overall, I think the steps hasn't been populated in the scorecard yet, correct? And this is a rough step because like following what Mo is doing is different than what is in the sheet.
Right. Remember the documentation for the license scanning isn't complete.
Right, but I think we're talking about having a detailed script. And
Yes.
so
I see. Okay.
because we had wanted to have a more detailed script for everything, and then we decided yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I have no idea, that would go into a doc, and then we'd link the doc from the sheet. So
Yes,
I can put that down as a note that we need a more detailed script, and Mo, I can help you put one of those together.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one last surprise. I'm hoping to test live and fail spectacularly after the grading, of course. Okay, so it looks like the pipeline finished. Let's just take a quick peek.
So for step 3, did we want to pick like a score? Did we want to make it like a 3 or a 4 pending A, Kevin, and B, a better script?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more of a 3 personally, okay. But I'm happy to be overruled. So okay.
I mean, we can always, like we said later, round down because when we do it later, we can always get a better score. So
yes, and this is why I'm asking for the detailed script, because it's hard for me to help grade because there's nothing for me to compare against what we're doing and what the expected results are. I mean, Mo has great little detail and think we're taking it a step further, but we need to have it written down so that everybody in the demo can chime in and then grade together. So yeah, I think we made progress. I think a 3 is reasonable.
Okay, thanks, Mac. And Mo, you want to continue?
Sure. All right, so back to the end of the pip depth, sorry, this was the pip env pipeline. And we could see that we also identified the new package dependencies and the licenses associated with those package dependencies. So this is actually functioning for both pip and pip env. Okay, so the last step, I guess, is to actually merge one of the pipelines. So now there's going to be a conflict if I merge one because I won't be able to merge the other. So I have to pick one, and I'll let the audience decide who they prefer, pip or pip env.
I don't know that it matters, right, in this case. So just
let's do pip then. All right, pip it is. So we'll merge pip. That should trigger another pipeline, the same output. Once the pipeline's completed, we'll then be able to see the details of the detected licenses on the license compliance page here.
And this was a similar reasoning as we discussed last time, where right now only is the correct term default branch? Only your default branch is the one that is represented on our dashboards.
Correct, default branch. Just watch that pipeline. Okay, so while that's running, I wanted to delight. So one of the things that is still in development is the ability to install a custom root certificate. So the dependency scanning team has already defined, and I'm sorry if I'm not respecting the scoring, I can wait. But I'll just continue until someone tells me to stop. So we have this additional CA cert bundle environment variable that's being utilized in dependency scanning to install a root certificate into the image so that any outbound calls to internal HTTPS endpoints can be respected. So we're currently working on trying to just make that work in license scanning as well. So I'm going to just run another change and let's see what happens. So if we go to the CI/CD output, or configuration, I've added a variable, which is the additional CA cert bundle. And the actual value itself is the X509 certificate for the container registry, which is this guy here. So if we take that endpoint here, we can actually see the certificate associated with that.
The public cert key?
Versus the private. The private's never shared in the
right.
The
That's what I'm
TLS.
saying is it just needs to be the public one that's put in there.
Yeah, that's right. So the certificate, in fact, that's public info. They would, if they're giving us a full chain of trust, they would never provide private keys because they wouldn't have access to it. Whoever's giving
I'm
it
just,
to us.
that's what I'm just checking.
Okay.
Is that it's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
public? Okay.
Oh, I see. The concern was, I think, okay. So the concern is like, why didn't I make this protected? Because it's not really private data, but I can make.
Well, no, the concern was that that variable only takes the public key because we don't have and we don't want the private key. And
Correct.
the answer was yes, it takes the public key.
Absolutely, yes. So the source of this information came from just connecting to the actual endpoint and reading out the X509 details from that entry. Oops, I didn't provide the port. Sorry, I was talking. So I'm going to just connect to 443. Oops, and let me just kill this quickly. There we go. Okay, so we can see the certificate details. The subject and the issuer are the same. It's a self-signed cert. This is for the actual Python or the PyPy instance that we're running. And this is the actual X509 certificate encoded as base 64. So I took this, literally just copied this and pasted that into that environment variable. And this would be the sort of the interface for customers to install their trusted certificates. At this point, it's only doing adding, it's not replacing. So speaking with the customer this morning, they said they were fine with using the trusted certificates that were available with the system, as well as adding their own. In some cases, I think like in more hardcore organizations, they're gonna say, no, we don't care about the trusted certs that come with the OS. We have our PEM file that we trust and we don't care about what else the OS trusts. And so I'm not handling that scenario for now, it's just adding it. So if you have this environment variable, the pipeline will attempt to install that certificate into the the trusted store. And I haven't actually tested this before this. So we're gonna have some fun here. I'm gonna open the IDE, and I'm sorry if this isn't fun to you, but it's so fun to me. Let's go down to pip file, and let's just get rid of this. We're gonna make that true. So no more hacking or overriding, and I need to move the webcam stuff out of the way. We're gonna say true. So now we're gonna tell the scanner to please respect the TLS verification step. So you're gonna connect to this endpoint, you're gonna get an X509 certificate from that endpoint. I want you to see if you trust that endpoint by first verifying the signature on it to see if that signature is from someone that you trust in our root certificate store. We're going to commit this directly to the pip env branch, and we're going to see if this works.
And while that's running, did the other one finish?
Yeah, the other one finished. We already looked at, oh, sorry, the master branch, my bad.
Yeah. Can we actually see dashboards and things now?
Yeah, master branch should have been done. Let's go back. There we go. Woo! The crowd goes wild. Okay, so we've got, what we're looking at here is the license compliance dashboard for all the software licenses that were detected on the master branch, or the, sorry, on the default branch. Should I go back to the grading? Is that the...
All right, and I'm assuming the links, were they clickable, not clickable?
That's a great question, actually. I didn't check that. So in this case, let's open up, oops, let's go to
I believe it's going to be a complicated answer of the same thing as the vulnerability interactions, which is if the computer you're accessing the limited connectivity environment with, which in this case, Mo's computer,
my host
has connectivity, then the links will work. Otherwise, they are expected to not work.
Okay, yeah, I just thought we should probably cover that aspect again. So.
Yeah, yes, that's a good point. All right, so grading time, or do we want to see if the TLS check worked?
So we showed the merge request tab, we showed the license list, we showed the pipeline results, and there is no group dashboard for this yet, much to the consternation of everyone. So I think that's everything. So I think we could grade it.
So I think the max should be a 3 because if you're missing steps, I think it's incomplete. So it's either, I think, a 2 or a 3. Do we have bugs that we need to fix as part of this in addition to
what steps are missing?
the steps to the scorecard?
Oh, okay.
It's not even defined here. So I see that as like part of the grading. It's the mechanism is incomplete. So that triggers the clause in number 3. And the rest is from what we demoed just now. Do we have follow-up items? Are there any bugs or anything we need to do next time?
So the piece that I was showing you last with installing the root certificate authority, that part isn't in production yet. That's still being in development. That's likely going to have issues. Everything else before that is in production. I haven't been able to identify any defects. I'm waiting for open issues. I'm happy to be told that there are bugs, but in my own testing and with the testing of our team, I haven't identified any issues yet.
And note the CA cert is a separate line item in the post MVC stuff.
Yep.
So anyone else have any other concerns about the pipeline completion results for PIP license?
Yeah, I don't think so. Nothing from me. For me, just based off not having, it being incomplete, I'd be good with a 3 as well. So I agree with Mac.
Can we check to see if it worked?
Yes, let's see if it works. I think that's the most important thing.
Please. Okay, so pipeline still running, isn't it? Oh, no, finished just now. Let's double check that was the right commit. So this is the one where I switched false to true. And let's take a look, make sure I didn't miss anything else in the changes. So all I did was specify pip index URL, the actual URL to pull from, true, true, true. Okay, the moment of truth, Mo, here we go. We detected licenses. Ah! I'm sorry, I'm happy. So we're on our way to detect, or to being able to install the certificate or a trusted certificate from our customers into the cert store. Just like, since I've got you, here's what's actually happening. So we detected that environment variable that I showed earlier. I forget what it's called, the additional CA cert bundle. We identified that that was provided in the environment. So during scan time, we took that file, we dropped it into a location where it can then be appended to the default certificate chains that ships with the Debian 10 instance. And we're just calling update CA certificates. And here's the gory details. So we can actually see every certificate, every root certificate that's being trusted on this instance. And at the very bottom, we should see our custom one, or maybe not the bottom, where is it? Okay, so we added one new one and 0 were removed. And if we scroll a little bit further, where's the details? Okay, here's the new one that we just added. So we just added our custom CA, a custom root certificate for that PyPy package index URL. It was approved. We then went and downloaded the actual packages from the mirror. And ta-da, that's the end of the show.
All right. So any questions from anyone? Anything that we need to dive back into?
Come on, critical feedback here. What could I do better here? Go, don't be nice to me.
So, hey, Mo, this is Kevin. I just joined late because I had a conflicting call, but so you get all that done today based on the conversation we had this morning?
I had been working on this because my understanding of how root certificate authorities work was what was described this morning. So that's the direction I had been going as like a sort of a side process. Now, what I was hearing was conflicting information. So hearing from the customer today was fantastic because it just verified my understanding of how they wanted to deliver it, because being able to give us the full chain allows us to actually do this. And then I'm like, if I don't have the full chain, how do I get the root intermediate certificates? There's no URL in the X509 that tells me where the intermediate certificates are. I've got the CRL, I've got the OCSP URL, there's nothing else. So, and like when they said, no, we're gonna have the full bundle, I was like, fantastic. Then the only concern left was, are we gonna add that to the store or are we gonna replace the store? And they said they were okay with adding it. In some scenarios, it'll be like a full replacement in the store. And I haven't solved that, but at least we've made some progress towards.
Cool. Just to propagate that amongst your compatriots in the other sections so that they can learn as well on that one, because I'm glad finally got the two of you hooked up to solve that. So thanks.
Kevin, that is not in production. That is still in development. And so
I understand.
I gave you, okay.
I totally understand.
Okay.
Don't worry. And I missed the first half, but I'll review later. So sorry.
Yeah, when you watch the video, the two things we wanted you to kind of pay critical attention to were the fact that we were doing our own Python mirror that was not hosted. Like, so last time the repo that we used was the GitLab internal repo to the instance, not like the public GitLab repo. And so if you could just check that out. And then obviously we don't have public user documentation yet, and that's a failing. But we knew that, and we know we have to create that. So I think that's the two main call outs.
All right, great.
Okay, critical feedback time. What do we got? What do we need to work on? What's the most important thing? Where should I be focusing my attention? Because after this call, I think I'm jumping into NPM, unless like the CA
documentation.
Documentation?
Yeah.
Really? That's where you want me to spend my time?
Yes, that is honestly really where I want you to go.
Fine, documentation it is.
And if anyone here needs my help with like structuring scorecards, and I'm more than happy to be a resource here as well. So documentation steps, let's write it down, make it crisp.
Probably. I was thinking he could work on the documentation for the users, and I could work on the script documentation.
And like volunteer me, I'm more than happy to jump in the fray.
Okay, I'll get a documentation MR going immediately. And then can I work on NPM?
Then you can work on NPM.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and anything else before I end the recording?
Let's show the chart.
Oh yes, sorry, Mac. Please, by all means.
So great job, everyone. I think PIP is a 3, and I'm looking forward to the next demo where you can take it.
Yep, awesome.
Cool.
Yep. Thanks, Mo. Thanks everybody for joining the demo. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now and hope everybody has a great rest of their day. Thanks.